Let's try this again. Hi, everybody. How are you doing today? I'm Emily Best. I'm the founder and CEO of Seed&Spark. This is Bill Pugin coming to us from the Sign Language Company, who will help us make this event more accessible. And we're very excited to have you here. And if you're here, it's much to the chagrin of all of the social media algorithms who make it very hard to share events like this. But we're really glad for you to join us. This is a remarkable panel of creatives, activists, and collective experts on the subject of storytelling and reproductive freedom. If you haven't been to one of these events before, I wanted to kick things off with a land acknowledgement that most of the land that we're on is occupied territory. So I'm coming to you from Muskogee territory outside of Atlanta, Georgia. And for those of you who aren't familiar with Seed&Spark, we're a platform built to support creators by providing tools for wherever you are in your journey, from crowdfunding and education to impactful distribution. Our crowdfunding platform has an 88% campaign success rate, 0 platform fees, and a new patron circle where industry leaders can contribute up to $5,000 to your crowdfunding campaign. And we do that for the same reason that we're hosting this conversation today. And the reason that we're hosting this conversation today is because from our inception, we have been about accelerating the cultural impact of creativity. And that cultural impact to us is very simple. It is about advancing the core value of human dignity. And that's why we help storytellers broaden stories told about every aspect of human experience that has been traditionally used to attack their dignity. That might be race or gender or socioeconomic status or physical ability or mental health or so much more. And that's why today we're also bringing reproductive freedom into the core, because reproductive rights are currently being used to sideline the fundamental human dignity of certain bodies. And those are the same ideologies that are being used to sideline and marginalize trans people, people of color. There is a really shared attack on human dignity right now that's coming from a lot of sides. And we're here to talk about the way that stories can help create new shared realities and a more just shared context. Because the stories we decide to tell, the imaginations who get to make the rules of those stories, the lenses that frame our scenes, and the faces that we choose as main characters, they determine the way that we understand the world around us. So we view that as core to our mission at Seed and Spark. That's why we're hosting a conversation about reproductive rights and storytelling. And so in the words of the late, great genius, Biggie Smalls, if you don't know, now you know. Let's introduce our incredible panelists. We'll start with Erika Galindo. She's the organizing program manager at the Lilith Fund, an abortion fund that has historically been there to support people seeking abortion in Central and Southern Texas. She's organized within queer and trans immigration and labor and reproductive justice issues. She is at the forefront of all of this. And at Lilith Fund, Erika fosters leadership in callers, centering them in the fight for abortion access through different mediums. So welcome, Erika. Thank you so much for being here today. Jess Jacobs is an actress, writer, producer, such a multi-hyphenate, and philanthropist, activist. She's premiered films at Caren and at South by. She's spoken at Sundance and Women Deliver, just the UN General Assembly Week, a little event, and many others. And she's the co-founder of Invisible Pictures, the chair of the board for Rooftop Films, shout out to Rooftop, and was named one of Real Leaders Magazine's 100 Visionary Leaders. Please welcome my dear friend, Jess Jacobs. Thank you so much for being here. Meghan Ross, when we say we are for creators by creators at Seed and Spark, Meghan is a prime example. She is a writer, she's a producer, she's a director, she's a comedian, she's an activist, and she is Seed and Spark's head of creator success. She's a fellow in the Sundance Episodic Lab 2021 with her comedy pilot, Here to Make Friends. I just saw a short version and it's so good. Her shorts, If You Ever Hurt My Daughter, I Swear to God I'll Let Her Navigate Her Own Emotional Growth, featuring John Hamm. And finally, A Female Presidential Candidate Likeable Enough for Men, featuring Rachel Bloom, premiered on this little platform called The New Yorker and made their Best of 2020 list. And Meghan, welcome. Hi, how are you? Nice to see you again this week. And then finally, and last but certainly not least, is Caren Spruch. She is Planned Parenthood Federation of America's National Director of Arts and Entertainment Engagement. She's like at the epicenter of what we're trying to talk about here. She collaborates directly with directors, producers, and writers to change the conversation around the issues of reproductive rights through accurate and sensitive storytelling. The Washington Post magazine calls her Planned Parenthood's secret, now not so secret, weapon, because we just said it. And once again, a huge thank you to Bill Pugin for being here. Hi, Caren. Welcome.
Hello. Thank you.
Listen, we told everybody we were going to do this, and most of you have been really incredibly supportive. But as you can imagine, in this day and age, we received some heinous and threatening commentary. And so we've had to shut down the normal channels we would for engagement. But if you are participating today and you would like to pose a question to this panel, you can email us at marketing@seedandspark.com, and we will make sure I will see it before the end of today. And if you've emailed us in advance, I've got those questions and we put them in order. So without further ado, my first question is for Caren, if you wouldn't mind, which is if you can just sort of level set at the top of this conversation about the status of abortion access and reproductive rights currently.
Sure. I mean, as everyone knows, tragically, but not unexpectedly, Roe was overturned, Roe v. Wade, the decision that gave us our constitutional right to control our own bodies. And this has truly caused a national health crisis. As of yesterday, 16 abortion bans were in effect. And I know today the South Carolina House passed the ban, even though yesterday they did not. They decided not to pass the ban. Today they did. So we're seeing chaos and confusion amongst patients and really everybody. And this was what was intended by the anti-abortion politicians who have passed these laws. And as we all know, banning abortion does not stop people from having abortion. It only puts more people's lives in danger. So we have all been robbed of our decision to control our lives, our personal health care decisions, determine our own best futures, and Emily, as you said, of our human dignity. And I guess for me, that's why I'm so excited to be here today, because we need to see more stories about what it means to lose your autonomy. And I guess sadly, these stories, I mean, have all the drama and conflict that you need in a story, and we just need to tell the real stories of how these bans are impacting people so that someday we won't be dealing with this.
So if I can ask a follow-up question to that, because I hear this anxiety in creators a lot, that like they've spent their lives building up expertise around storytelling, and then a crisis hits that is actively negatively impacting humans' lives, safety, medical decisions right now. Why focus on storytelling? So can you tell me a little bit about how you specifically work with storytellers, and just give us some examples of what it looks like when it's successful?
Well, the why, I guess, is because, I mean, I really believe that this will change through art. Art reaches people, as you all well know, in a way that nothing else does. And we're not going to be able to change policy until we change the culture. And you are the culture changers. You know how to do that better than we do. So that's why I started working with artists of all kinds, really, many, many years ago, because I truly believe we're not going to be able to win without you. And we have made much, much progress with you, because we know that 80% of people did not want to see Roe overturned, want abortion safe and legal. And we're seeing this every day. We're seeing people rise up to fight these bans. And I think the anti-abortion Republicans, who are in this case behind these bans, were not fully prepared. They did not fully understand the impact of these stories, and that's where you come in.
That's really helpful. Erika, I wanted to ask, for folks who might not be familiar with your incredible work at the Lilith Fund, can you talk a little bit about your work and the role that storytelling plays in your work specifically?
Thank you. So at Lilith Fund, historically, we've provided direct financial assistance to people who need abortions. And we've obviously had to pivot a little since the laws have taken effect in Texas. But the other part of the work that we do that I'm more involved with is emotional support and leadership support for the people who call us and want to get involved. So we have programs and just like things that we like to do where when we ask, our callers if they want to become storytellers to any sort of degree, we want to support them in that. And so we help them by providing training either internally or with our partners at places like We Testify that, kind of help prepare and train storytellers for going public. We also like to support storytellers, even if they necessarily don't want to go public. People obviously have different reservations for all sorts of reasons, and we just want to be able to share their stories in a way that makes sense through whatever medium it is that we're working, both, just as to tell their stories, because we know that their stories are important, the people who call us and what they're going through. Our volunteers hear firsthand what's happening, but we want to bring that to the people who support us. And then also through policy changes. And so there's been times where we've asked people to share their stories for testimony at the state level or local level, because we know that sharing stories is kind of the most effective in changing hearts and changing minds. Policymakers have all the stats, all of the, that information that they have that research experts can provide them, but the real human impact is, I think, what makes a difference, and the fact that we can bring stories to them on our clients' terms and the ways that make them comfortable. So really my job is to help prepare people, explain to them why are we sharing your story today, and then also be there afterwards to decompress, because that's also really big and important. And we like to support our storytellers obviously through that training, and then obviously just make sure that folks are compensated, because we see all of this as labor. It's emotional labor that they have to do and to rehash these stories again and again. So we're really lucky to be able to do that for them.
Oh man, there's so many things you said that I just want to underline, highlight, and plus 1,000. And the things that I really want to just reflect back to our audience a second time, because they bear repeating, is on a storyteller's own terms. That really speaks to me. For the direct purpose potentially of influencing policy, right? I think sometimes as storytellers, whether it's our story or we're telling someone else's, we forget the capacity to influence actual action. And that third piece is compensated, which I know that as creators, generally we put at the bottom of the list, but is so powerful when thinking about the act of storytelling as labor, especially as it relates to movement building. So that's, we don't hear that often in the creator only side. And I like just the bringing together of whether you're a creator or you're a person who has experience that you want to share. You're also, those are both storytellers with slightly different sides that make up, and that's why bringing Jess and Meghan into this conversation is so exciting. So Jess, as we move sort of sideways, you have shared both your own stories, but you've also just made an incredible short film that's on the festival circuit called Choices. Can you talk a little bit about your choice to make that film and tell that story?
Yes, absolutely. This is just my most favorite conversation to have. So thank you so much, Emily, and the whole Seed&Spark team for hosting it. So yeah, I both am an abortion storyteller and a content creator. I had an abortion when I was a teenager. It was very much a big part of my decision to make the film. I have been working in entertainment since I was 15, and then after having my abortion, after kind of confronting the stigma that I experienced around it, finally shared the story of my abortion with my mother, and I have consent from her to share this. She also shared that she had an abortion also as a teenager. And we had never talked about it. It had not been a part of my growing up. And so it was this moment where I realized that I had felt super alone. I had felt like I had done something wrong and bad, even though it was totally the right thing for me to do, to terminate my pregnancy. And so understanding that I could have that kind of sisterhood with my own mother, but that I hadn't had that opportunity, really sparked something in me to want to bring both the kind of career and the entertainment and the content creation piece into conversation with the activism and the advocacy that I had started to do in that aftermath. And so Choices, I started writing in 2018, and it was really born out of the fact that I had seen a lot of scripts come either across my desk or out in the world. A number of them Caren has worked on. And I was seeing the abortion side of the conversation here and there, but I was really kind of curious about what it would be like to be able to look at both sides of the coin. I think we often talk about abortion as there is abortion and then there's anti-abortion. And it really is, that's a false dichotomy. It is abortion, and if you don't have an abortion, you give birth. And frankly, most people that have abortions are already parents. And so these two sides of the coin, I felt like were not being sort of lifted up in the mainstream media, in journalism. I've had so many conversations with friends. There's so much literature on the subject, but I was just excited to be able to do something that you can't do in a documentary, and to be able to sort of explore both sides. So the film, and this is a little bit of a spoiler alert, but it happens in the first 30 seconds. So the film actually explores both choices. So our lead character, Zazie, chooses to have an abortion and she chooses to bring her pregnancy to term. We have this sort of split world moment. And we follow her in the 24 hours after that decision and before either her abortion appointment or her first prenatal appointment. Caren was kind enough to read the script, to consult with us a bit. And we also worked with a team out of Ohio, which is where the film is set, called Preterm Ohio. They're a clinic there that provides abortion access now up to 6 weeks because of the ban that's in place there, but has been providing care for Ohioans for a very long time. And they were also wonderful consultants with us. So it's a little bit of background on the film and the decision to make it, and understanding the power of the narrative to be able to influence the conversation and to kind of spark something that, like I said before, you can't do in a documentary, you can't do in real life. You don't have somebody who's lived exactly both of those worlds. And so to be able to use the form was fun and very exciting.
Thank you so much for that. And thank you for sharing those stories. So I want to ask, I'm going to bring Meghan into the conversation because Meghan, you're a comedian every day of your life. Having just normal business meetings with Meghan is fun, especially if you're in the chat. Never not dropping a good joke, this one. And it's one of the most delightful aspects of working alongside her, but it also features heavily in your work. And when you said you were making this comedy that involved abortion, I was so curious to read it. And I'd love you to talk a little bit about, because you set it in Texas, and some stuff happened from when you wrote it to when you shot it. And so I'd love for you to talk about a little bit the experience of like incorporating an abortion story in a comedic tone, and also what happens when the landscape changes. How do you think of your storytelling as the landscape changes?
Yeah. The theme is definitely like comedic timing on my short, because Roe v. Wade was overturned 24 hours before we rehearsed outside Planned Parenthood, 48 hours before our first scene outside Planned Parenthood of Central Texas. But going back to when abortion was legal in Texas, so I wrote this script. It's a script about adult friendship, female friendship, but what I call the abortion theme in it is like the dog pill and the dog food, which I know all too well. I'm like trying to trick my dog every day on his meds. But basically I'm like sneaking in normalizing abortion in a story that is about other topics, because I think abortion is a non-issue. Like, I don't think it should be an issue. I wish we didn't have to have this conversation. Like, I remember when Erika and Amanda, the exec director, came on my comedy show at that time of the month, they were like, I think I asked you, like, what do you wish for the future of Lilith Fund? And you said, for us to not exist. And like, that's like the goal, for everyone to be able to access abortion, for it to not be an issue, for it to be normalized. So that's how I approached it in my comedy. I have people just kind of casually talking about it. Like, there's like 14-year-olds that have non-pregnancy packs where they're like, you'll be my abortion designated driver. It's very casual. And there's a scene in it that I knew I wanted to shoot. So I got contacts with Planned Parenthood of Greater Texas through Autumn, and Autumn actually introduced me to your work, Caren, and I'm like, this is the coolest job ever. I'm glad this exists. So Autumn helped us secure the location to shoot outside of a Planned Parenthood. And then she also, she was there for our rehearsal and letting us in. Anna from her office also stayed with us. Like, we had like a 5 a.m. call time, and she stayed. This is 48 hours after Roe v. Wade was overturned. And she stayed with us the entire time we were at Planned Parenthood. They gave us access to the inside. We were only filming in the outside. But before we got to set, I was, so cut back to May. The leak happened. So this was the first sort of like, oh shit moment. And Emily, I got you on Zoom and I was like freaking out because the next day I was supposed to pitch my project for the Sundance Lab. And I mentioned, the abortion scene in the pitch. And so I just felt like a fraud. I was like, what are we doing? What's the point of all this? And Emily helped me sort of double down and commit to this pitch. And then the day after the pitch is when I talked to Autumn. Of course, our meeting had to move because the leak happened. And she told me, she said, well, I read the script and it's great and everything seems, kosher, but I do want to kind of call out, like, a red flag for me is that this happened. This is a scene in Texas. And by the time you're in distribution, but by the time you're screening it, abortion will be likely illegal because there's a trigger ban in Texas. And I already, in my mind, thought abortion has been illegal since September when the 6-week abortion ban happened. But hearing her say that, I was like, oh, she works for Planned Parenthood. She has to jump the gun. But I did not realize that Roe v. Wade would be overturned before we even filmed. So luckily we had a plan in place for how we were going to address the film. And I created an impact campaign, like one sheeter, because I knew post-production, like once we were in distribution, that we would take the film on the road and do comedy show fundraisers that would benefit Lilith Fund. But I didn't realize I would have to address it this early. And so we have an end card after the short film ends, where we mention that, like, while this scene was shot, while the scene was shot in Texas, and abortion was not legal at the time we shot it. It was when we wrote it, and so we wanted to stay in a world where abortion was accessible and normalized and legal. So I kind of made it a fantasy, essentially. Like, this is still a non-issue in my fiction short, and then we link to abortion resources through needabortion.org, which Lilith Fund set up, and Lilith Fund as well. But yeah, so the timing was just, could not plan that.
Can I chime in?
Yes, please.
Yeah.
So first of all, thank you, Meghan. And I made up this job many, many, many years ago, precisely, and everyone thought I was crazy in my own office, but precisely because what you do is so important, as Jess said, fighting the stigma and the shame that still surround these issues, and not just abortion. It's really the whole continuum of sexual and reproductive health care. And with what Justice Thomas said, we know that he's not willing to stop here. He's going after birth control, IVF, LGBTQ plus rights, etc. So I think that's why your stories are just so important. And when I talk to content creators, sometimes I don't think you fully understand the impact that you have, because when people are watching a character on television or in a film, and they're even talking about abortion, or they actually had an abortion, it does so much to help that viewer understand why someone would make this decision. It personalizes it, and it enables someone to have a conversation. So yes, I really believe what you do is vitally important, the impact.
So
Can I have you repeat that to my mother? Just kidding.
Yes, you can.
Jess, go ahead. If you have a response there, please chime in.
I just wanted to lift up what Meghan said too about, like, kind of that she built a fantasy world. I think that that's also such the power of art and storytelling, to be able to tell a story of a world that is different than the one that we live in, so that we can envision it. It's the sort of, like, if you can see it, you can be it. If you know, all of these things, like, if we can create these worlds where abortion is destigmatized, where these options are available and accessible, like, it's such a powerful tool in the toolbox, in addition to telling the stories of how challenging it is, of the impact of the bans. Like, I think we need both sides. And I just have been, we shot a scene where there was a protester outside of the clinic in Choices, and we ended up leaving it on the cutting room floor, because I was like, I don't want it. And my director, Erika Rose, agreed. We were both like, we don't want to give them more airtime. They have so much airtime. It's not about them. It's about this woman and this choice, in this case, like, that she is making, or the choices that she is making. And so I just wanted to lift that up, because I think that that's such a powerful point.
You answered the question I was going to ask, which was actually about, like, balancing the sort of education, near-term real life with painting a picture of the future. I didn't know if any of you had another thought about that, because that if you see it, you can be it, or envisioning that future is so vital to getting there. Just wanted to give a moment for that. Erika?
Yeah, no, I just wanted to piggyback on that comment from Jess, in that there's this, like, concept of organizing being a lot like building your own science fiction, because we kind of are trying to build worlds that don't exist yet. And so we have to, like, present that image to the people that we're trying to organize with, to, like, be like, it is possible because it looks like this, and we know that you know that this is right, and so therefore we have to fight for it together. And so it's kind of like building, I use this phrase a lot, but it's like building the boat that we want while we're still swimming in the crappy old one. And it's really hard. It's like a kind of a song and dance at the same time, but it's also spelling it out for each other. It's like why we keep coming back and why we keep fighting for these things, because it can be very much soul sucking if we let our, imagination, our political imagination die. Like it can become very draining. And so storytelling, telling each other our stories of why we do this work is super important. And some of that does feel a little bit like science fiction, because it's also like, oh, we are all in this like reality that we know sucks, and we're trying to build a world that we know wouldn't have to suck. And it sounds so foreign to a lot of us because we obviously aren't there yet, but it's real, and we can fight for it. And I think that's super important.
And all the largest storytelling franchises are science fiction. Just want to point that out. How can we help? There's sort of two sides, right? So Caren and Erika, how can we help creators tell accurate and sensitive stories? And Jess and Meghan, how did you ensure that you told accurate and sensitive stories?
So I guess I have a few things to say. One is that, I've been so focused, and not just since Roe overturned. It was clear this was coming. Roe was always the floor, not the ceiling. Forever, people have already been systemically, discriminated against in terms of access and care, never had the choice. So that's sort of the floor, really, where we started. So we've been preparing for the moment, but also as I worked on many, many scripts, like hundreds at this point of television and film, really trying to normalize abortion by having a character make the decision to have an abortion, not necessarily agonize and, tear their hair out, but yes, it's a very serious decision. Talk to their friends or their family, as most people do, make the decision, have the abortion, and then live their best life. And that was very important because for many, many years, we did not see that. Someone either miscarried, they fell down the stairs, they died, they were shamed, they were judged. It was a horror show, and it is now for other reasons. Then we've made a lot of progress, but there were still stories that weren't told before Roe. Those stories are even more critical as, now to tell everybody's abortion story. Everyone has abortions, and everyone needs to be seen on screen. And someone mentioned, more people who have abortions are actually already parents, but we don't see that typically. We see a young white person who does not have a child and might be a little bit hard, but they get their abortion. And it's been better, and I've been lucky to work on some, and I worked on Never, Rarely, Sometimes, Always, for example, for 4 years from the very, very beginning. And I guess at some point I can maybe use that as an example to say how, and Mikhail will send you a list of how I can help. But I think I've been thinking a lot more about all of this and the importance of telling the stories of everyone affected, the importance of telling the stories of providers. We really haven't seen that. The brave nurses, doctors who are going to work to do what they were trained to do. And they can't. Of all the activists we've seen rising up and marching in state capitals and across the country, because the state is where the action will be now. Students, we have I'm Planned Parenthood's national office, and we have all the different groups working with all these constituencies. So we've been working with lots of college students who have worked with their administration to get medication abortion on campus, have emergency contraception on campus. We know that, and I'm telling you all this because these are the stories, that the safe haven states, we think that 26 states will ultimately ban abortion, and the numbers change every day. It's even hard for me to keep up with it. But what is it going to mean like for the doctors and the patients in the safe haven state where abortion is legal, when everyone, and we've seen this, is coming in to have an abortion, and they will not ultimately be able to provide care to everyone who needs it. Half the country really can't do that. So many people have told their stories, and Erika can talk about that too, including members of Congress who have told their stories on Capitol Hill. Legislators are fighting to codify Roe. Lawyers are fighting to prevent the ban. So there are all those stories. But then there are also all the positive stories. And that's sort of, everybody who is fighting to keep this up. So there's the horror story of what is the real impact of losing someone's autonomy. What does it mean to have to find childcare, to have to take a day off from work, to find the money to travel, to pay for a hotel? What does it mean to that person's family and those around them? That is so important now, because clearly the politicians passing these bills did not take this into consideration, do not understand this, and are surprised, quite frankly, at what is happening right now in this country. So those good stories to show the fight, to inspire other people to fight, but the real experience of what is happening to so many and millions of people will be impacted by these bans.
Thank you so much for that. I want to add to that. My mom called me this morning, so excited, because she is going back to, they had suspended the Planned Parenthood escort program in Sacramento where she lives, and they've reinstated it, and she's going back to escort a couple days a week. But she was saying they've ramped up their program because the protesting has ramped up on the other side of it. And I'm like, I just marvel at my 5'1", I won't tell you how old she is, but she's older than I am, mom, like out there going toe to toe with protesters and working to make women feel safe just to access healthcare. And those are pieces that I think you're right to paint the entire universe of people involved in this this fight. I actually hadn't thought about how relevant that she called me and told me that was until just now.
Please thank her.
I will. Erika, you were going to say.
No, I just really wanted to echo what Caren said. And also, I think we obviously like to start with the storyteller and like hear what their experience was and be honest about that. And honestly, I think a thread for a lot of our storytellers and the people that we've worked with is that, like, even if the pregnancy was wanted, the abortion itself is usually not what traumatizes someone. It's usually all of the hoops that they had to jump through and having to be pregnant when they didn't want to be. And I think that's the thing that we like to emphasize to people, is that, like, abortion itself, it depends with person to person, but really the thing that is exasperating and like re-traumatizing people is the fact that it's all of these trap laws and restrictions that people have to jump through, and really pushing that to policymakers or whoever are listening to us, because we're letting them know, like, there's a way that you could reduce this by just like, decriminalizing or like unrestricting abortion. And it's very simple. But y'all are doing your best to make it seem like this super big issue that's really a non-issue for the majority of Americans. And so that's just something that like we really do like to push, and like a thread that we do find that's very common. So yeah, that's really all I wanted to add.
That's a really important point, because abortion is healthcare, and that's all that it is. It is one of the safest procedures, and it is a very quick procedure. So I was recently interviewed about, do I think the depictions on screen are getting too graphic? And I don't think so, because then you can see and demystify what an abortion is. And I think that is another very important thing that you can all do. And just saying abortion is also something you can do. And it doesn't have to be the entire script, It could be a brief mention. It could be anything. I mean, it could be showing pills or a condom on an end table, when you talk about the whole range of care. So it can be as much as you want, but anything you do is very significant.
I think,
Go ahead.
well, I was just going to say, in terms of kind of what the process looks like of writing a script and being able to integrate abortion related storylines. Obviously choices, it's the center storyline. I do remember like watching Shrill on Hulu and being like, wow, it's just so cool to see the end of the pilot and she gets an abortion, and then we don't like talk about it for the rest of the TV show. It's just like we kind of know like in our head that she's living this life because she got to make this choice, but it's not really about that. And so in like future content, I'm like, I just want to like slip it in there, and it doesn't have to be about that. But it was also incredibly joyful to get to make a film that centered reproductive experience in its entirety. I will say I think, you know, Emily, you mentioned like there is some feedback that people give when storylines have abortion in them, and definitely when they center them, and we've gotten some pushback for sure. And I think being able to ensure that what we were representing was accurate has allowed us to stand up against that pushback in a way that feels really empowering. It just feels really good to be able to say, like, you can have I will disagree with your anti-abortion opinion. I suppose you're entitled to it, but what we're representing on screen is accurate. It is something that, you know, we talked to doctors, we talked to abortion providers, we talked to OBGYNs, we talked to OBGYNs in the state where the film is set, and actually had a really interesting conversation where the OBGYN who we talked to, he does not provide abortions, but he was making sure that we get all the sort of like prenatal stuff right for the pregnancy storyline where she brings her pregnancy to term. Anyway, he had come from California, and he was saying, you know, one of the things that he noticed in Ohio that was so different was that it was a deviation from the norm when somebody chose to have an abortion in the hospital that he worked in. And so being able to show that, but without stigmatizing it, like we didn't want you to feel like this was the wrong choice. We wanted to balance both of the choices. And actually in a talk back, we got some feedback that was interesting, that somebody was like, the abortion storyline, nobody ever questions her decision. And in the storyline where she's going to bring her pregnancy to term, her mom is asking her if she's sure that she wants to make this choice for herself, not asking her to have an abortion at all, like no coercion, but really kind of like asking her to investigate that decision. And I think it was something, I mean, in this talk back, somebody was like, I've never seen that on screen. It's always the abortion storyline where somebody's like, are you sure this is like really going to be bad for you? This is going to hurt, you know? And in this case, she had the support of her best in choices. Daisy has the support of her best friend. And it was just like, even just that simple act was something that like sparked some feedback, some sort of positive feedback and intrigue. So I thought was really interesting. But, you know, getting in touch with providers is a really great way. Obviously, Caren is an incredible resource. There's also Hollywood Health and Society is another group that I know does help folks like connect with different organizations depending on what kind of storylines they're exploring in order to ensure that they're accurate. So just like some of those opportunities.
Yeah, I think I'm very lucky to work in an organization that people know and love, that they trust us, that so many people support us, and that I have access to lawyers, doctors, nurses, sex educators. So when I'm reading a script, I am neurotic about accuracy, and I know most of it, but I will always go back and call someone and just review the line, not reveal the script, if that's an issue. So yes, accuracy is very important. From the beginning to after a film is premiered, will always work with people about the best way to talk about the issue, so that if you encounter any resistance, you are prepared with the facts.
Meghan, I'd be curious how does this also come into play even in comedic storytelling?
Yeah, well, as a Texas resident, I definitely, you know, try to find the humor in the hellscape. So I focused on like the comedy of the scene, and made sure that like everything else, because like when I had Autumn read it, so I made sure like I wasn't you know, like doing anything inaccurate. because it was also happening outside the Planned Parenthood. Like this is, the protagonist is following her ex-friend, and seeing her with her work wife. And she doesn't get mad that she's getting an abortion. She gets mad that she didn't ask her to be her abortion designated driver. So it's just showing the selfishness of the protagonist, and the non-issue of it all. Like, it's like, I would have been there for you. Like, everyone wanted to help her. And we do have protesters, but man, do I make them seem dumb. Like I really had fun with the signs, and they're all like lovely. Like, one of them is my friend, and he was hysterical, and I just wanted to use them as a punchline, because our Texas lawmakers say like the dumbest stuff ever all the time. And so I'm like, let me have them be a punchline and not the focus of the scene, but kind of fuel the comedy as this friendship second breakup is happening outside the Planned Parenthood scene, and there's just like chaos happening. But yeah, I didn't want to go too far in. Like, you see them go into the Planned Parenthood. There's a security guard there, and we were gonna have we had a line where the protesters were supposed to stay behind, because I know that exists. Not sure if people respect it. Luckily in Austin, like Central Austin doesn't have that issue, but I know elsewhere they would. But so yeah, just getting that blessing from Autumn at Planned Parenthood, and then, with the Impact campaign, giving Erika and Amanda a heads up, like, because I was, I didn't even realize, like, by the time we were going to be raising money for them, like, the Lilith Fund's going to be funding of all different resources. It's not going to be what the Lilith Fund was when, I first came to Texas, and we did all these awesome comedy shows to fundraise for Lilith Fund. That's how I came across Lilith Fund, was from an all-woman and non-binary comedy show called Betty Fest. And then Betty Fest became Cherry Bomb Fest. And so I feel like it's funny. My mom the other day was like, abortion's not funny. And I'm like, oh, I mean, I think what's happening is hysterical. But, and I think we don't need to be so like I think we can be delicate in how it's portrayed, but I don't think we can't make fun of the like world we're in right now, and find the humor in how ridiculous it is. Like, I wrote jokes for my show that I was like, wow, these lawmakers are like really half-assing it. Like, they should have to, make choices about all the other things I don't want to make about my body, like fries or a salad or white pants after Labor Day, or before my period. Like, so I try to show how ridiculous it is that this is a conversation we're having through the punchline, through the humor, while not like disrespecting that it is a thing that people go through.
I want to second what Meghan said, and that just say that sometimes at my end, I think comedy is one of the best ways, but it's most difficult, because sometimes around accuracy issues. But I worked on Obvious Child for 4 years, and that was sort of, I think, the one that changed the world in a lot of ways. And it wasn't, as you're saying, Meghan, it's not that abortion is funny. It's that life is funny, and abortion happens while you're living your life. So that's sort of the way that I look at it. Especially if it's filmed at a Planned Parenthood, that part needs to be accurate. But yeah, life is funny. So there are many opportunities, and I think it's a great way to reach people with comedy.
I'd be interested to know how you think about really delivering on the impact of storytelling. So Erika, you kind of started us off talking about some of the ways you use storytelling for specific purposes. And I'd love to just hear a little bit more from this panel on, so there's the making of the thing and the telling of the story, and that the story is, accurate, good, representative, and either advancing education or advancing a world in which it's sort of contributing to the science fiction that is the world we'd like to see. But what about ensuring that those stories actually land with the people we need to land them with? Anyone?
We use film and television as an organizing tool. So every few months, I'll do an update to every Planned Parenthood in the country, talking about shows that, you know, projects we've worked on. And as a nonprofit, we can't promote a for-profit, so it's complicated, but I talk about it through the lens of our mission, which is ensuring everyone has access to care, especially those marginalized groups who have never had access. So that's one way. I mean, I work with affiliates for Never Rarely, Sometimes Always. We got a grant of $5,000, which was huge, and use that so that 10 affiliates, this is pre-Roe, but in states where we anticipated or where they already had restrictions, we did virtual screenings during the pandemic. And Eliza Hittman, the writer-director, Sydney and Talia, the stars, were part of all 10 of those screenings. And we had the money, the tickets then were like $30 to buy the screenings, and we had conversations. So that's one way. We help with premieres. I mean, there are just so many ways we talk about it on social media. I talk about it in interviews. So there are just so many ways because, yeah, I mean, the point is, I feel like I want to make sure it's accurate. Then I want the world to see it. So I have to do it in our own unique Planned Parenthood way, but there are many ways. And, you know, with one email, I can reach every Planned Parenthood. So, yeah, to me, that's a very important and a good question because, yeah, it has to have an impact, or what's the point?
Yeah, similar to what Caren was describing. I learned about impact campaigns also through my work at Seed&Spark. And I was like, okay, this is the project I'm going to do this for and take it on the road. So my goal is first to hit up like the major cities where abortion is very protected and my friends can give us money to give to Lilith Fund. So like New York and LA, where like I have connections to the comedy scene. And then I'm going to get really strategic in finding cities in red states similar to Austin. But this is going to be a challenge for me because I'm trying to find, you know, a place that we can safely screen, but also reach people who might not, you know, be excited to watch something that talks about abortion. So that is going to be like my big challenge next year, is to find those safe spaces that people with opposing opinions are open to seeing something from a different perspective. Because yeah, I feel like that's the challenge of living in Austin, is like there's only so much change I can create in Austin because we're in this little blueberry in the tomato soup. So having to go outside of Austin to, you know, all these other more rural areas where, like, I feel like they, like, if you put something in front of someone that they're not used to seeing, like, you do see that change. Like you hear stories about this all the time. So yeah, hopefully.
And to be fair to Texas, there are more blueberries there. They've just been gerrymandered into the tomato soup.
Exactly. Exactly. We're purple. But yeah, so that's how I'm going to try to get that in front of other people and hopefully be able to distribute it online so that more people can access it beyond just our liberal bubbles.
Yeah, I think the distribution method is such an interesting question, and especially for short film, and that's like a whole other conversation. But with choices, we actually recently went to Kansas in advance of the referendum vote on August 2nd. So we partnered with Repro Film, which is a project of Mama Film. They're really wonderful. And so we partnered with them to do a multi-city tour in Kansas. And what we found, I mean, I think to Meghan's point and to Emily's response, is like the number of people that support access to abortion is so much higher than we think it is because of how disproportionately represented anti-abortion is in the media. And so, I mean, when you see like a 60% vote no in a state as red as Kansas, like as red, it really just demonstrates that the audiences for these stories are actually so much more broad than we expect them to be. We had just an amazing experience touring down in Kansas. We did some voter registration. We were there on like the last day of their voter registration, so we were able to have a little booth where people could sign up to vote. And we're able to partner with some organizations down there like Trust Women, Kansans for Constitutional Freedom, ACLU Kansas, etc. and actually one of the questions that we got was, how do you think people on the coast see us? And I was like, I think that they see you as your representatives, because your representatives are sort of as loud as they could possibly be. But it is extremely evident to me that your representatives are not representing all of your interests. Like being in Kansas and being in these conversations and meeting real people, it's just so obvious. I mean, the same, we screened at I woke up in Arkansas the morning that Roe fell. And we were there for the Bentonville Film Festival, and there was a trigger law. And so basically abortion was illegal like that morning. And I went to I had to do an interview, and then I went to the coffee shop afterwards, and I was wearing a shirt that says I had an abortion. And one of the people behind the counter, we both just started crying. We just like looked at each other and started crying. And it was like, we are in this together. Like, this is not what you want. It's not like, it's so against the desires of the majority of people. And so to be able to get these stories out and have the conversations in New York and LA and in the rural places and in these cities and red states, you know, we're starting to put together a Kentucky tour, because there's a vote on November 8th, a ballot measure there. It's super powerful. It's just like one of the most beautiful things to watch art bring people together, and to watch the reality play out of how normal everybody thinks this should be, even if they're not yet comfortable talking about it because of how much it's been stigmatized. Like, that isn't a reason. I don't know. I feel like there are just so many more opportunities out there to connect than there are to divide, and they're doing a very, very good job of trying to divide us. But I think, like, as artists, as content creators, as organizers, like, we have so much power, and it's just really a beautiful thing to get to use it in an impact campaign.
Thank you so much, Jess. Okay, so we have just about 3 minutes left with two of them. Well, we could do this for a while, this group. Starting with Erika, I would just love to hear from you if there's sort of one thing you'd like storytellers to think about or focus on in terms of their impact, or if there's sort of like a parting piece of like, hey, you can do this. Like, what is your note of encouragement for folks who are trying to really bring about the change they want to see in this world with their work?
I want to encourage those folks to keep telling those stories that are super duper impactful. Even if you don't necessarily see the impact, the law that you're trying to affect doesn't change or whatever. There's still a huge impact that you're making that you maybe not even feeling. And if you're starting from a place of honesty and just trying to like uplift the issue, the story, the people, I think you cannot go wrong as you're trying to like stay true to that. So I think like just keep going, even if you don't see the fruits of your labor today, it's happening, and there is a ripple effect even if you're not aware of it.
Thank you so much. Meghan?
I want to remind people that they don't have to have their rights threatened in order to fight for them. Because I am a white passing Arab woman. Like, if I needed an abortion, I'd have the money and access to, wedding debt, but I would find the means to get that abortion. So, Lilith Fund fights for the most marginalized in Texas. And I have not had an abortion, but that doesn't mean I can't talk about it and, amplify everyone's effort to get an abortion. I think the same thing goes for any other issue. Like, currently, like, my voting rights aren't being attacked. I'm not trans, all these other things, but I fight for those issues because those are the people that have the most challenges for them to be able to speak up. So I need to use my privilege to be able to talk about these things, even if they come out in like really silly comedies.
Thank you. Jess?
I would say that as a content creator, it can be easy to try to let perfect be the enemy of the good. And you don't have to be an expert. You can rely on experts like Caren to be able to help, and Erika to be able to help ensure that that there's accuracy, but that you are an expert in your own truth and you're an expert as a storyteller, and that it can feel really intimidating to integrate these kinds of storylines because there's so much, it's so politicized. But you don't have to get it perfect. So I guess it's like, go for it, try.
Thank you. Caren?
We value your expertise tremendously. Abortion is a very common procedure. Nearly 1 in 4 women will have had one in their lifetime. So people have either had one or they know someone who's had one, and culture change takes time. And we're on our way. We're doing it. I think we got to the 80% support, which is the highest it had been since Roe was passed, through what we've all been doing. So I think we just have to keep fighting.
I feel amazing after this, and recharged in a way I haven't for some time. So Erika, Jess, Meghan, Caren, thank you unbelievably for your generosity and your time and your expertise and these words of encouragement today. I want to thank Bill Pugin and the Sign Language Company for helping us make this event more accessible. Julie Haberstick, as ever, on tech and organizing. None of this happens without her. And Danny and Frankie behind the scenes, making so many things happen to make sure that these connect with our community. And to you, our wonderful audience, for watching and engaging at home in this discussion. I want you to know that without abortion, Seed&Spark would not exist, and neither would these two people. And so I am grateful to a medical procedure that has made my entire life possible. So if you enjoyed today's event and you're looking for support in sharing your story, Seed&Spark is always there for you if you were super inspired. So there's an Art of the Pitch workshop tomorrow that can help you with your pitch and your pitch video. And we're working with Nifty. You can RSVP and check out more of our upcoming workshops and events at seedandspark.com/events. Please, if you are not already supporting Planned Parenthood and Lilith Fund, whether it's with your dollars or with your promotion or with your volunteer time, do the thing, or connect with. I live in Georgia, and ARC Southeast is an organization similar to Lilith Fund that covers my territory. Find out who the abortion funds around you are and lend a hand in whatever way you can in the multiple ways that they have had to pivot and find new resources and new support. Thank you. Have a great rest of your week, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.